So this landlord died inside his house, decomposed and turned into a skeleton without his neighbors or anyone else knowing about it. His skeleton would only be discovered 4 years later after his compound turned into a jungle filled with snakes and other dangerous animals. This is the kind of story that would unlock or worsen your fear of living alone. This is the shocking story of Mr. John Aderemi Abiola, a 67-year-old engineer who died alone in his home in the Adeosun Idi Orogbo Community in Ido local government area of Oyo State and was not discovered until almost 4 years later. As the years passed from 2019 to 2020, then 2021 and finally approaching the end of 2022, the neighbors in the Adeosun community began to notice something disturbing about one particular house in their area. The compound was becoming completely overgrown with bush, thick weeds and wild plants were taking over the property, growing so tall and wild that they were beginning to climb over the fence into neighboring properties. The house itself was built in a very unique way that guaranteed maximum privacy for whoever lived there. The fence surrounding the compound was extremely high, reaching almost to where the roof of the building began. The gate was solid and completely impossible to see through. There were no gaps, no openings, nothing that would allow anyone to peek inside and see what was happening in the compound. It was designed to keep the outside world completely out. The landlords in the community became concerned about the abandoned-looking property. They called a meeting to discuss what should be done about the situation. The bush was getting out of control and it was clear that nobody was taking care of the property anymore. The landlords decided that they should find a way to break into the compound and clear the bush themselves. However, after discussing the legal implications of such an action, they became worried about the decision leading to legal troubles. These concerns made them shelve their plan. They decided it was better to wait and see if the owner would eventually return, but the owner never came back. The bush continued to grow wilder and wilder, turning the compound into something that looked more like a jungle than a residential property. About 2 years before the discovery, a new neighbor moved into the house right next to the overgrown property with his family. He had just completed construction of his own home and was excited to settle in with his wife and children. But his excitement would soon turn into fear and constant worry. Almost immediately after moving in, the new neighbor began experiencing a terrifying problem. Snakes were regularly crossing over from the bushy compound next door into his own property. These were not just small harmless snakes, some of them were large and dangerous. Along with snakes, other reptiles were also invading his compound, all coming from the thick jungle that had taken over his neighbor's land. The man and his family lived in constant fear. Every time they stepped outside their house, they had to be careful and watchful. Every time the children wanted to play in the compound, the parents had to first check for snakes. The attacks became so frequent and so unbearable that the family could no longer live in peace. Finally, the frustrated neighbor could not take it anymore. He filed a formal report with the Landlords Association in the community. He explained the dangerous situation his family was facing and demanded that something be done about the abandoned property next door. The Landlords Association took the complaint seriously this time. They understood that this was no longer just about a bush. This was now a matter of public safety. They went to the Akpete police station to seek approval for breaking into the compound to clear the bush. They explained the situation to the police and requested permission to take action. The police authorities gave them approval, and with the backing of law enforcement, the community could now legally enter the property and deal with the problem. On Sunday, September 4th, 2022, the Landlords Association hired laborers and gathered together to finally clear the bush. They arrived at the property with tools and equipment, ready to cut down the jungle that had taken over the compound. When they got to the gate, they faced their first challenge. The gate was locked and they had no key. They had no choice but to break it open. When they finally managed to break through the gate and enter the compound, they made a disturbing discovery. The gate had been locked from the inside. This was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. If the gate was locked from the inside, it meant someone had locked it from within the compound. But who and where were they now? The laborers began their work, cutting down the thick bush that had completely overtaken the property. As they cleared the front area of the compound, they discovered a car parked in the compound and covered in dust and vegetation. This discovery made everyone even more concerned. The laborers continued clearing until the main building itself was fully revealed. As the structure came into view, the people who gathered there noticed something unusual. One of the windows of the house was open and the curtain had been shifted to the side. This caught the attention of one of the landlords, a man named Mohammed Ademola. Mr. Ademola had actually worked for the house owner in the past, doing carpentry work, including doors and wardrobes for the property. He knew the owner and had interacted with him when he was still around. Curious about what might be inside the room with the open window, Mr. Ademola decided to take a closer look. He took a cutlass from one of the laborers and used it to cut through the mosquito net that was covering the window. Then he leaned forward and looked inside the room. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, lying on the bed, was a skeleton. The complete skeletal remains of a human being were stretched out on the bedding. Looking upward, Mr. Ademola immediately raised an alarm, shouting for the others to come and see what he had discovered. The other landlords rushed to the window and also confirmed the horrifying sight. The news spread quickly through the community, leaving people in shock and disbelief. The chairman of the Landlords Association immediately called the then divisional police officer in charge of Agbete Division, SP Grace. She immediately sent detectives to the scene to investigate and take appropriate action. When the police first opened the entrance to the apartment, they confirmed what the landlords had seen through the window. The skeleton was indeed there, lying on the bed. Beside the remains were 3 mobile phones. One phone was by the left-hand side, another was at the back of the head and still connected to a wall socket as if it had been charging. The third one was by the right-hand side. Looking around the room, investigators found various items covered in dust. There was a bottle of histamine, packets of bicarbonate of soda, vitamin C, Coartem anti-malaria medication, and herbal tea. A plasma TV was still hanging on the wall. The wardrobe still contained clothing and other personal items. A laptop was also found with the phones. From the skull and exposed teeth, it was clear that the deceased had been gap-toothed in front. The boxer shorts could still be seen around the waist, though the top that must have been worn had been eaten away by the decomposing flesh. Only a tiny piece of fabric remained by the side of the body. Through documents found in the house, including a driver's license found in a wallet, the police were able to identify the deceased. His name was Aderemi John Abiola, and his date of birth was October 1st, 1955, which meant he was 67 years old at the time of his death. He had last been seen around December 2018, which meant he had been dead in his house for almost 4 years. But identifying the body was only the first step. The next challenge was finding his family members. This proved to be extremely difficult because Mr. Abiola had been a very private person who did not share information about his family with anyone in the community. The police tried to use the phone numbers found on his phones and identity cards, but the lines had become invalid after years of inactivity. When they finally reached one number, the person who answered seemed confused by the inquiries and was laughing, suggesting that the number had been reassigned to someone else. The Landlords Association also tried to get information from people who had worked for Mr. Abiola, the bricklayer, the welder, the mechanic, and others, but all of them said the same thing. Mr. Abiola was not the type of person to disclose his family information to anyone. He preferred to be alone and kept his personal life extremely private. From what people in the community knew, Mr. Abiola had moved into the house in July 2017. He was an engineer who was based in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, before relocating to Ibadan. He had lived in several areas within Ibadan city before finally constructing his own house in the Adeosun community. He was known for his frequent travels back to Port Harcourt to do his engineering work whenever needed. The community members said he was not in close relationship with other residents except for formal greetings whenever their paths crossed. He had attended only one landlords association meeting, despite being a consistent payer of all community dues. Mohammed Ademola, the furniture maker who had helped Mr. Abiola with carpentry work, shared more details about the last time he saw him alive. It was in 2018, shortly before the Ileya celebration. Mr. Abiola had told him he wanted to travel to Port Harcourt and would not spend more than 2 weeks there. He said he would be back to celebrate Ileya in Ibadan. They waited for his return, but he never came back. After Ileya passed and there was still no sign of him, they began to wonder where he was. But because his gate was designed in a way that would not reveal whether he was in or out, they assumed he was still in Port Harcourt, perhaps engaged in work or had fallen ill. After days of investigation and searching, the police finally managed to locate Mr. Abiola's family members. According to the police statement, family members confirmed the deceased's identity and the fact that he was last seen around 2018. When the family was finally contacted, more information about Mr. Abiola's personality and life came to light. His cousin revealed that Abiola had always loved to be alone right from when he was young. He was not the type who chased after women or sought relationships. In fact, the family had even begged him to remarry, and give him another wife after his first marriage ended, but he had declined their offers. It was the family who had advised him to build a second house on his property for tenants so that he would have someone staying with him and would not be completely isolated. He had agreed to this suggestion and had started executing the plan, but death came before the building could be completed. Mr. Abiola's older brother had a different perspective on what happened to him. According to the brother, Abiola was a kind man until he got married to his Igbo wife. The brother blamed the wife and claimed that Abiola changed completely and withdrew from his family after the woman came into his life. From what was gathered, Mr. Abiola and his wife had a disagreement in Port Harcourt and separated. She remained in Port Harcourt, where they had a story building with 4 flats, while he moved to Ibadan and built his own house in Adeosun without letting anyone know exactly where he was living. He had told one worker that he would let his family know his location later, but apparently never did. Mr. Abiola had also mentioned to some people that he had 2 children living in the United States of America. He had even called one of them, a daughter, on the phone while a worker was present, and they spoke for a long time. So he did have family members, but he had cut himself off from them. People who knew him said he had high blood pressure and was careful about taking his medication. Even while construction work was going on at his house, he would move away from areas where dust was being raised or smoke was coming out. He would say that at his age, he could not afford to breathe in such things as his health could not sustain it. He was conscious about taking care of his health. This makes his death even more mysterious. Did he die from a medical emergency related to his high blood pressure? Did he suffer a heart attack or stroke and collapse on his bed? The position of his body, lying upward on the bed with no visible signs of struggle, suggested that death might have come suddenly and peacefully, perhaps while he was resting or sleeping. After the family was located and contacted, arrangements were made for the burial. Mr. Abiola's remains were eventually evacuated and buried in his own compound, the same property where he had died alone and remained undiscovered for almost 4 years. The then Commissioner of Police had directed that the case be transferred to the State Criminal Investigation Department for thorough investigation to determine the possible cause of death. The scene was cordoned off in the interest of public health and safety while investigations continued. What do you think happened to Mr. Abiola? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel for more true life and crime stories.